down those cards.
Fortune teller!
Cards mean different things at different times.
Do you know anything about tarot cards?
Oh, a crystal ball.
Gather around, children.
Listen to the mystic.
Journey.
Podcast.
I'm no mystic.
Welcome back to the Mystic Fool's Journey podcast. And today we have a special guest, Marco Visconti, author of the Aleister Crowley Manual, Thelemic Magic for Modern Times, and practitioner of the Western esoteric tradition. So, for all of our listeners who are meeting you for the first time, Marco, we'd love for you to introduce yourself and give us any information that you'd like us to start off with.
Well, first of all, thank you all for having me, and it's great to be here. Where to start? I am very bad at speaking about myself, despite, being very public on the internet and constantly speaking about
Right?
what I do. In general, let's say that I've been interested and in the Western esoteric tradition, and especially in Thelema, which is the magical philosophy that was introduced by Aleister Crowley in the early 1900s. Most of my life, I discovered Crowley in a very, very strange way on a comic book when I was 12, and I'm 45 now, so it's been a while. It's been a long journey, and it's been a journey of I've been first it was just like an interest. I was reading around, and growing up in Rome, Italy in the 90s, there was very little you could find about Crowley at all. Especially, it was. I mean, if you can imagine, it was all pretty much like only the main book and in Italian, and even badly translated of that. Thankfully, there's a much better edition right now. But a few years later, I was like, trying to use the first examples of the internet using BBSs and IRCnet. This really dates me, of course. But
No, it's great. You've got experience.
I like the same word there. Thank you very much. But yeah, I mean that was the way that I was starting to reach out for other folks around the world, and eventually realizing that you could order books from from England, from the UK, and from the US, and then eventually I got initiated into what's it called, like the AA or Gentium Astrum, the Superstar, which is Crowley's magical order. And then a few years later, I would find out about the OTO, or Ordo Templariatis, that is the Order of the Temple of the East, which it's kind of like Thelemic Freemasonry, right? And it's not really, and it's not like a magical order per se. There's some nuances there, and I'm gonna bother you with that. But I haven't enjoyed that immediately because I didn't really gel with the people that I met in Rome at the beginning. But then in due time, I would join, and then I would leave it as well because I didn't gel with the worldwide organization. Let's put it like that. I wrote about these things online. If people are curious, they can find me everywhere and can read my articles. It's a bit of a bummer. I would like not to speak about that part, but it's out there. Let's put it like that. But yeah, I mean, eventually, the lockdown hit, and I find myself with a lot of time. And I was like, well, maybe I can put all this, this passion that has been so fundamental in all my life, I can try and synthesize it and share it with others. At that point in time, I'm talking for 2020, I already had ran some classes here in London through Treadwell's bookshop. Treadwell's is one of the biggest esoteric bookshops in the world. If you ever go to London, please visit. And it's owned by a friend of mine, Christina Oakley-Harrington. And I was the online manager for a while, online shop manager over there for a few years. And so that's where, at some point, Christina, and the focus of Treadwell's, especially for its live events, were always around witchcraft and Wicca. And so at some point, Christina was like, hey, why don't you do something about the live? So she kind of started me on this whole, teaching about what I learned for a more generic public. And, again, now a few years pass and it's 2020 and there's the lockdowns. So I say, hey, let's see if people are interested. I started with a newsletter. I was actually releasing a newsletter every week. It's a lot of time, as you can say at the time.
Wow, that is, yeah, wow.
And it was, and I realized there was a lot of interest. I guess likely because we were all very traumatized by whatever was happening, or why, especially at the beginning, we didn't know what was going to happen. It was something. I mean, I really believe all of us, we did live through a very traumatizing event that maybe we will still have to make sense of it in the coming years. And then also there was also the reality that we have a lot of time to spend. So the newsletter eventually evolved into a Patreon community. That Patreon community kind of became quite big, to be fair, because at some point I had over 300 people. And it was really, I mean, like it's almost strange to say that I have fond memories of the lockdown years, because of course everything around was falling apart. But I'll tell you, that community was a bit of an oasis in the chaos. We were like always on Zoom. I was like doing live streams and talking about magic, 360 degrees, up to 3-4 times a week at time, right? And we created some very good friendships there that it still lasts to this day. And the Discord server is still there, right? Like it's good. There's not as many people as there were before. It's not as intense as it was before, but it's still there. And like from that point, then it was last summer I decided to leave behind the Patreon platform, because it wasn't really working for the kind of courses that I was then putting together. Because of course Patreon works very well for people that do podcasts, for instance, right? But if you do things like you need an archive or you need like a course outline, it's just not there. And so I moved to another platform, and that's where I am right now. In all of this, I realized that I did produce a lot of words. I don't really see myself as I don't really see myself as a writer. Of course, English is not my main tongue, and I never studied writing or anything like that. But people were saying that I write in a very clear way, and so one of my students that is a published author was like, "Hey, why don't you let me speak with my publishers and see if they're interested in that?" And they were, right? And so with some tweaks here, and there, the help of a very good editing team, and in general a fantastic publishing team, the Aleister Crowley manual, Galactic Magic for Modern Times, came out this was the 14th of February for St. Valentine. Perfect Valentine's gift, I would say. And the book is all red, so it's a very Valentine-y, I think. Of course, there's a big Baphomet on top. I don't know if that's your thing, but the book has been very well received. I think as of today, I sold, over 1,000 copies, which for this niche market as this one, it's incredible. And this is what I'm doing. Like long story short, this is what I'm doing. I do have a YouTube channel where I should really keep a better schedule at doing live streams, but as you can, things are different now, right? And I put together a podcast, and this is what I'm doing right now. And now I'm here, so thank you for inviting me again.
Yes, of course, and you're here. Yes, you've done so much, and thank you for that overview. We love to hear how different people's journeys progress throughout life, and it sounded like 12 is when this whole journey kind of started for you, and it's really wonderful to be able to see and look back how far you've come and how much you've accomplished. So thank you for sharing that with us.
Well, thank you.
So I feel like I have to ask, you're from Italy yourself, and your last name is Visconti. Is there any chance you have relations with the family that originally commissioned the Visconti Sforza tarot deck?
Yes, indeed.
Really?
I am in direct line of their heir to the same lineage of the Visconti family that was the Duca, we call them in Italy, or
I think so.
Duke, I suppose, or Lord of Milan in the of Lords of Milan in the from the 13 to the 1400s, and the Visconti family, as you can imagine, massive family. All these noble families that dates back to the Middle Ages and Renaissance are massive, and my branch is one of the less fortunate when it comes to
oh no,
physical gains. Let's put it like that.
Yeah.
Story goes that one of my ancestors, 7 generations removed, moved from Milan first to Genoa and then to Rome, and married a prostitute. We got to fall in love with a prostitute, married a prostitute, and then pretty much was will say, okay, like you're gonna be the black sheep of the family. But you know what? Being a Thelemite, I kind of like that, right? It's,
Yeah, there you go. It very much fits the
yeah,
theme.
exactly. Yeah.
Yeah.
Absolutely, absolutely. I agree with you. And it's yeah. I mean, I do carry that heritage.
Wow.
The interesting bit, though, is that in my family, it wasn't my dad's side, the Visconti side, that introduced me to the esoteric, to the tarot as well. It was more my mom's side. Mom was the one who was really into magic, and she was coming from a very modest family coming from the Marche regions of Italy, but she also had all the connection with folk magic and that kind of side of Italian stregoeia or stregoneia. That it definitely informed some of my early years. So yeah, I mean that's where I get my interest, right? But I would say that then my real interest was ignited by finding about Crowley in comic book. So imagine that.
Yeah, very cool. And so you mentioned you did author an amazing book called the Aleister Crowley Manual. I have to say, I am a purchaser. I'm working through the book right now. I can attest to its awesomeness.
No, the moment was learning about Crowley himself, right? It is the summer of 1990. I spent a lot of time alone, and I'm a bit of a I don't want to say maybe a little recluse kid, a bit shy, a little early teenage kid, and I like reading, and I don't like going out too much. So also because I was living in this big house with a lot of books, but it wasn't really like in the center of the city, so I couldn't really like walk anywhere, and so I was reading all the time. And discovering about Crowley, what really resonated with me, even as that young age, was that this man was iconic. Was someone who knew very much what was proper and decided to do the polar opposite of it at any turn, right? Always trying to push the envelope and always trying to be himself. Okay, and that's something that of course, at that young age, I did not appreciate all the problems that the problems of Crowley the man,
right?
And how being maybe this kind of reckless definitely created a lot of damage around him, and that's undeniable. But you're young, and a few years later I would become a meth-head at Wall, so it was just like, oh, this guy is cool, I want to be like that, right? And that's what really pushed me, right? I purchased Magic Ethereum Practice, Liber ABA, also known as the Blue Brick in this day and age, owing to its most popular current edition. And I didn't understand anything about it. It's like, okay, this is maybe there's something in there. And there were some other magical books at the time. I'm thinking about the Dominion of Witchcraft Evolution, and it was all about get this plant, carve this, do this. Crowley was about the mysteries of the Sacred Heart and the art of the erotic alchemy of Eucharist. And I was like, what this means? But it sounds interesting, and I want to learn more. I would spend then my teenage years getting more and more into Telema, because you got to understand this is the 90s, right? And a lot of bands at the time were either drawing influence, which I'm a music person. I love music. I was a guitar player, still am a guitar player. And then I spent a good chunk of my life as a touring musician, right? So music was always been my other passion. And for me, it was really like, okay, all these bands that I like speak about Crowley and I need to go even deeper into this. And so I started practicing a little bit, and this pretty much like the kind of practices you find in my book, which are the entry level practices, the ones that help you build your body of light, and as I call it, the foundation of your magical pyramid. In time, eventually I would turn 18, and I would seek initiation into the AA. By strange synchronicities or chance, whatever you want to call it, I ended up meeting an AA teacher that was an Italian living in Rome, belonging to a very obscure lineage, but a proper one. And so I went there, and the rest is history, I suppose. But the reason why, for instance, I decided to really focus on this book, on those core practices, it is because I remembered very well how fundamental they were for me to make sense of magic. And when I speak of magic, I really intend, magic with the K. Which is like this. It's not just like an antiquated spelling, or it's even not just as Croy says many times that he used the K to differentiate it from stage magic or magicianship, the illusionism. It's really because in Magic with the K, it is a unique blend of Eastern and Western practices. Eastern, you have, yoga, of course, and Tantra in time, a more advanced one. But then also you have the Western side, which is, the ceremonial side. So the crafting of the tools, the using of the circle, the conjuration of the spirits, etc., etc. So this unique blend is what magic is. And it's also the kind of stuff that you can learn as a complete beginner. You can do it without any sort of fancy tools or anything like that. And in fact, it was, my selling point. Can I say that? Yeah, maybe not.
Yeah, I mean,
my selling point when I was trying, when I was trying to communicate that to people during lockdowns, like, hey, these are tools that can help you really make sense of whatever is happening, or even help you fight loneliness and solitude, and the fact that you're closing or maybe was a very small flat somewhere in a city, because they will expand your perceptions, right? They will make you realize that the world is much bigger than it is. Instead of looking outside, but looking inward. And so that's how the book came to be, really.
That's awesome. Yeah, I think a lot of us genuinely need that instruction on how to make it more accessible, because I think a lot of people think like, I need to have a lot of tools, I need to have fancy altars, fancy robes, and it should be accessible. And it feels like Aleister Crowley wanted it to be accessible.
I think so as well, in the sense that Crowley himself eventually would leave behind ceremonial magic, so the magic of the lodge, the magic of the altar, the magic of the tool entirely, because his focus on the more Eastern side of things and then eventually sex magic would lead him to just realize that at the end of the day, if you have built your foundation solidly, then everything else becomes more an exteriorization of things that are already inside of you. I would say at the same time that there are some kinds of practices which I hint about in the book, but there are more advanced practices, like everything that pertains to conjuration, everything speaks about the calling spirits. That if you want to do them by the book, I would say you do need, at least at the beginning, you do need a set of tools and whatnot. Mostly because it's like, all those tools, all those instructions are like, the general number of a spirit. Like you can contact the spirit with all these things, and then once you establish a relationship, the spirit will give you his personal phone number, and then you can call them in a different way, right?
Yeah.
But
that's a good metaphor. That's a very good metaphor.
So in researching Crowley, it seems like he was a pretty complicated guy. And it's almost like, to me, it seems like he just loved to be hated in a way. His public persona was very out there for sure. And it seems like modern Thelemites are trying to almost break away from associating Crowley with Thelema. How has Thelema changed since it has been founded?
So Crowley was definitely loving the spotlight. There's no doubts about it. He was feeding into the wickedest man in the world, right? Which is something that came from what we call here in the UK, the tabloid press, like, the same Daily Mail that in 2023 speaks ill of Meghan Markle was speaking ill of Aleister Crowley, because that's what the tabloid press does here in the UK. That's how it works, right? But Crowley was leaning into it heavily. Just to give you an example, in Magic Interior Practice, it says that the best blood is that of the moon, which maybe it refers to the menstrual blood, but that is also the one of a child. And of course, this was like everybody saying, "Oh, see, he is like a child-killing molester and monster." And in fact, he's speaking about male ejaculation. But and it's like, this is very clear if you read all of it, right? Because of course the idea of the blood of the semen, then they shared, and so it's dead, right? But and it is very clear, but if you read all of it, but he almost never said it out loud. He always like hides this thing in the footnotes or he was leaning into it because he really believed that any sort of publicity would be good publicity. To be fair, history has proven him wrong because Telema still carries, right? Telema still carries the heavy stigma of this source of idea, especially in this moment where we are facing this satanic panic 2.0, the ultra-reactionary approach that we were all steeped into, unfortunately, in these days. I wish I would have been a little bit more smart. Yeah, also we have to face in reality that Crowley the man, and I always speak of Crowley the man versus the Master Therion, which is one of his titles as a master, as a teacher. I feel like they're really different characters because if you read across his corpus and you read his diaries, there is a voice there. But then if you read what we call the holy books of Telema, the received text, the instructions, the mystical instructions, the voice that emerges there, it's very different. From one side, people would say, well, of course, because it's the received texts are the gods speaking. I don't know if that's the truth. I'm a very skeptic Telemite, and I try always to keep my feet on the ground. I don't know what is that. I mean, I have my own experiences with gods, demons, devils, and angels. But I'm always thinking, I'm talking to something. It could be inside me, it could be outside. It's about the communication, and I think the same with Crowley. But the message, if the tone is very different. So if that was Crowley, well, maybe Crowley did have multitudes inside him, as all of us do. Now, I would also like to say out loud that he was, as I said before, he was a very problematic character. I mean, he was a raging misogynist at times, and then at times he was a very fast-forward feminist. He was an incredibly racist at times, and then at other times he was very open to everybody. He was a very complex character. I don't think I would love to be Aleister Crowley's friend if he was alive in this day and age, because I think he would be one of those British gamblers that voted for Brexit.
That seems right.
but like the reality is that I also think that a certain kind of demonization is unwarranted. At the same time, there's also the opposite, in the sense that you mentioned the fact that you feel that Telema is trying to move away from Crowley. Well, that's pretty much what I'm trying to do with a few others. The reality, a couple of years ago, I put something out called the Post-Telemic Manifesto, and the message is really about, Crowley is the founder. Crowley can be even seen as the prophet of Telema, as it's written in the received mystical text. But at the same time, many others have come along, and many others should have their same spotlight as Crowley does. Because the reality is that in most of Telema, in most Telemic circles, you will find not so much magicians, but Aleister Crowley fanboys and fangirls and fun everything in the middle.
Yes,
right?
Fanatics.
Or outside the gender spectrum.
Yes.
Yeah, exactly. And that's really sad, because Crowley himself, he said that he never wanted to father a flock. And there you go, you have a flock, right?
Yeah.
What I notice also is that it kind of is in the nature of humanity wanting to latch on to this bigger than life characters and, just pretty much like create new Christ figures again and again, new, untouchable leaders that can come and deliver you from evil. Telema is about you being the true hero of your own journey, with all the glory and all the pain that and that's kind of scary for a lot of people, I think, because it's like, all of a sudden I am the protagonist, I am in charge of everything, and I'm responsible for everything.
I'm responsible.
But I think this is that exactly right, and I think this is actually how we really push forward the idea. And one of the core ideas of Telema is that you have these eons, which is both like time periods, but also law of magic, and new eons come along, new ideas come along, and I think that as a Telemite, I do recognize this idea. I think it's a valid idea. It's almost like changing iPhone or changing iOS. From time to time, you keep the phone, but you change the operating system, and then from time to time, you have to change the phone as well because somebody put planned obsolescence in it. Right? That's kind of how it works in magic. And so I feel like if we are to embody Telema, we have to leave behind everything that comes from before, including the hero worship of someone else. Let us be the hero. But it's very difficult, of course.
Yes.
A lot of responsibility comes along with that.
Yeah, that's a great way of explaining it. I love the iOS analogy. That's really fantastic.
I think more people could benefit.
I really wanted to put like an image in the book about showing, this idea. But then the other was like, I think people are going to get more confused about that. And I think it's true, right? Like, unless you really explain it, it's like, why am I looking about phones here? But that's the idea, right? Times change and new law of magics are pushed forward. And from time to time, you can still work into the same paradigm. From time to time, you have to change the entire paradigm. And yeah.
Yeah, that's awesome. Well, hey, moving into the Thoth Tarot deck, we've done an episode about the Thoth Tarot deck and how it was created. And Crowley himself even said that he wanted the Thoth Tarot deck to guide magic for the next 2 millennia. And so, needless to say, it's a very complex deck with a lot of layers, a lot of symbolism to dig into. And you actually have a whole course that you created about tarot magic with the Thoth deck. Do you have any advice for someone who might want to start using the deck but might be a little bit intimidated by it?
My suggestion is to just let the deck intimidate you. If you're a complete beginner to tarot, maybe you won't be too intimidated because, of course, you don't have all those ideas on the Fool's Journey and the court cards and the minor arcana already present in you, and so you're just like a blank slate, and you just see all these pictures and say, okay, well, they can be a bit daunting at times because Lady Frida Iris, the amazing artist of the deck, she really did a fantastic job in that, and some are very intense. It's because, as we said before, it's about you being the hero, and you being the hero means that from time to time, well, there's monsters to fight out there. But the point is that just let be intimidated by it, right? And then realize that it really is a very living and breathing deck. Like, if you spend some time with it, do some pulls. For instance, I never use and I don't teach to use spreads of any kinds with the Thoth deck. At all. And for me, it's all about letting the cards speak themselves. Maybe starting with 3 cards, and then, if needs be, moving to 4 more. That's kind of like, is that a spread? Yeah, maybe that is a spread. But in general, right? Not having a preconceived idea. Yeah, it is not a preconceived idea of what the first card means, the second card means, the third card means. It's more about the Thoth Tarot really is an ongoing kernel of energy that keeps churning and churning and churning, right? That's I would say that's what the old dilemma is. It's a very fiery tradition. It's a very fiery current, and so you have to learn that fire to keep going. It's almost like a sea of lava that keeps expanding, right? If you put it into limitation, if you try to limit itself, lava doesn't like to be limited. It would go somewhere else. It would spread around and possibly destroy everything. I'm not saying that the Thoth deck will destroy you. Don't be intimidated by that. And then I'm trying to immediately start saying things that might intimidate you. What I'm teaching right now, I am in. We're almost finished now. Thoth Tarot Magic is something that I put together to introduce folks to the. This is on the major arcana only, right? Mm-hmm. And I do that by virtue of presenting each major arcana via pathworking. For those of you who might not know what a pathworking is, it's a way of being guided through all the symbols that tarot card can have, but it can be about anything. You can do pathworkings on concepts. You can do pathworking on the Tree of Life, the Kabbalistic Tree of Life. You can do it on alchemical images, everything, right? It's all about somebody guiding you step by step by like putting you in a state of relaxation. And I use a set of tools, a set of audio devices like hemisync, theta waves to pretty much induce like a light trance in whoever is listening to this pathworking. And then in being in that more relaxed stage, and by that I mean it becomes almost like astral traveling, right? But it's very light astral traveling. You travel inside the card. You get inside the card and you see other, maybe when you're inside, maybe you see other aspects of the card that you didn't see before. I decided to go this way because I like the thought tarot is magical. So I did decide to put like a magical technique into this offering, but also because there's, as you said before, there's so much symbology in each of the cards, especially in the major arcana, that this is a way to try and introduce them all by having the student literally see them with their inner eyes. And I can tell you, like, we're now in the last month, and we've done 5 months, the last month right now, as most of the recording here in June 2023. And it's been great, right? Like I had almost 45 people sign up, something like that. And some of them were completely like never had tarot experience before, and I'll keep getting very good feedback. Like, they make sense of how the fool's journey, move from card to card to card to card, how that energy evolves across the major arcana. But also, I was able to explain all the thelemic addendum that has been put there by Crowley and Frida Aries, because there's a lot. Some cards are completely different. Some cards are similar, some cards are completely different. There are some very different attributions, and there's reasons for those different attributions that, unless you understand the lemma or somebody explains it to you, it might be completely, oh my God, why is that there? Why Sad is not the star? Why the letter Sad is not attributed to the star, but it's attributed to the emperor? Well, there's a very specific reason for that. And I go into that as well into the course. Will the thought tarot stand the next 2,000 years? Well, Crowley used the term 2,000 year because 2,000 year is kind of like an eon, right? So it should be like the eon. The thought tarot should be like the tarot of the eon of the horse. I mean, I don't know. I really don't know. Crowley really wanted to believe in, his own story. I personally have evidence, having worked with it, that the kind of insight you get from the thought tarot, when you know all these little nuances, it's much clearer than the kind of insight you get from other decks. It's also true that in my case, I almost don't see other decks anymore. Like, I mean, I have a collections of decks in the other room, like 100 decks, I don't know.
Yeah, we all do.
But the point is, every time I get any deck, I see the thought tarot, because that's it became almost like, if you're a complete beginner, just to like spend some time with it. Like I would say that if you're attracted to the thought tarot, possibly it's because you are attracted to whatever lies underneath the strange imagery. But don't expect to understand everything all at once. Just spend time with it. Lon Milo Duquette wrote a fantastic book, I don't have it here now, called Understanding the Thought Tarot. And it still is the best book you can find to have everything laid out in very simple terms. Or, I do a course.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, it's great to hear that you promote one card pulls with the Thoth deck. I think people get very intimidated when they first jump in and they start, writing on the spreads. The one card pulls are really where it's at for me personally.
There's also the thing about the elemental technique that the Thought Tarot uses big time. I guess maybe we can talk about it later. Just a little bit of...
go
please.
for it. Can you give us an overview of elemental dignities of tarot?
Absolutely. So the elemental dignities are basically this way of reading the tarot that is focused on the elemental energies behind the whole deck itself. Especially, I would say, especially in the minor arcana, but of course you find elemental, planetary, and zodiacal dignities also in the major arcana. The idea is that all the 4 suites are divided by element, and of course you have wands, it's fire, cups is water, swords is air, and finally discs or pentacles is earth. And these 4 elements, which are the 4 hermetic elements that you find very heavily in magical practice. In fact, in the beginning of your magical practice, that's what you're focusing on, right? Like you learn how to recognize, refine the elemental energies inside yourself and in the world around you. And then, of course, you find them also in the tarot deck, because, of course, the tarot deck is a mirror of reality. And each one of these elements have, they say, they either like each other or they're if they're neutral about each other or they really don't like each other, right?
Mhm.
And so,
Truly.
without going too much into detail, because man, we could spend a whole podcast episode on that. In general, is that like you can learn how these four streets that represent the four elements can either work together or work against. So, for instance, in a classic tree, in a three cards pool, what I do is that I always get the three cards there. If there's a major arcana, I will put that aside and read it first, almost like the significator, because major arcana are more important events, right? More all-encompassing events, and then go to look at the elemental dignities and see how the cards like each other. And basically, instead of focusing on the fact that I don't know, the six of pentacles, it's a great card because it's prosperity and all of that. But yeah, but if the six of pentacles, it's near I don't know, wands card. Well, yeah, it's prosperity, but maybe I don't know something you have to really work very hard for that, or it may sometimes something bad is coming away. It's not as precisely positive as it would say if we were just concentrating on the keywords or the meaning of the cards themselves. I always try to read them as this this ongoing narrative, okay? And this is the way I apply the elemental dignities, and this is the way that Crowley suggests how to apply the elemental dignities, to see the tarot and the cards whenever you do the pools as the cards try to tell you something, and they don't like, in my experience, they don't like to be constrained too much into all the systems that are very useful of keywords, of correspondences, of traditional readings.
Mm-hmm.
Thinking about what comes from Taylor and Levy and Arthur Waite, of course, and then everybody else over the course of the last century. But in general, like if you try to put that aside and you concentrate on the deities, I think it's actually simpler to read the cards like that. It becomes more direct, right? So yeah, that's something that I really try to teach to folks that joined my course, and it was very telling for me because it was like as I said, this is the first time that I ran this course, so I never knew if this teaching would resonate with people. But again, even people that were very familiar with the tarot, they were like, "Oh, I tried your way, and now out of sudden," which is not my way, it's Frozen's way, it's telepathy. It's like out of sudden, it's like everything, like my pools are clearer. I don't think that focusing on keywords is wrong at all. You just add more depth to the reading.
Yes.
But like focusing on the elementals, it's almost like, especially in the tarot deck, I would say it's the way that deck speaks. That deck speaks by virtue of how an element likes it and the other one or not. Then of course there's a layer of complexity that you can add when you start looking at the planetary correspondences, at the zodiac, how the signs are exalted or ruling what, and you can see the decans. You can get as complex as you want, right? But for starters, like focusing on the elemental dignities, it's a very good way of getting started with reading the cards.
That's some wonderful information, especially for people who are trying to dive in. I think that might even be easier than trying to learn each of the cards. If they can start with the elements, that might actually give them a better base to work from.
Yeah, I think so. Of course, in time, it's good to go to learn more about all all that there is.
Yeah.
Right? Even when we look at the minors, right? Like in the thought deck, each of the minors are also related to the Sephiroth, of course. The Sephiroth of the Kabbalistic tree of life. So you have the aces that are Kether, and then the tens are Malkuth, and that colors the meaning of the card as well. Again, sixes are Tiferet, so beauty, harmony, balance. So it's in general, you like sixes. Fives are Gebura, Mars, strife, conflict. Maybe you don't like that. But again, it could be that, in fact, the elemental, for instance, if you have like a 5 of discs alongside another 5 of cups, you have two cards of strife and conflict, but the elemental dignities are in favor of each other. So maybe, there's something harsh is coming, but it's something you're going to go through it. You're going to face it. Almost like it's almost like you're gonna win out. Like it can change the meaning of a card quite drastically if you start looking at these things. which if you just know that the five of swords is bad news, and it's always bad news. It's like you kind of miss the point of the reading itself. I hope it makes sense.
Oh no, that makes a lot of sense. It's very insightful. Thank you.
Well, hey, Marco, I don't want to take up any more of your time. Thank you so much for joining us today. Would you mind pointing out to our audience where they can find you? Definitely want to encourage them to pick up your book. I'm enjoying it. I'm sure they would as well.
Of course. So everybody can find me at marcovisconti.org. On my website, you can find the link to the book, a little bit of an explanation what the book is about, some videos as well, and links to the 2 courses that I offer. Like one, of course, Stealth Tarot Magic. We discussed about it. The course is the live event. The live cohort is ending in July 2023, but all the material will be available forever. So all the recordings, all the top works will be available, and it may be that I will run another live cohort in the future. And also the other course that I do, which is called Magic Without Tears, it's pretty much like the multimedia live version of the book. There with a bit more thought, in fact. But in general, like if you like the book and if you want to have pretty much like listen to me rambling about magic every week live on Zoom, where you can ask me questions directly and whatnot, that's another option. The current live cohort is running till October 2023. Once that is over, I think then will be the final live cohort, because at the point I will have so much video material to be able to edit everything together between 2 cohorts. Never say never, because introduction material always works, and people always like to always need it, I would say.
Ooh.
But I'm also I will be focusing on another course and possibly another book. That I will announce it I will probably announce it in July or August, depends when I finish to do all the preparatory work. But I can give a little preview. It will be focused on the concept of the Holy Guardian Angel and why it's so important. And it's more like advanced magic for beginners, if you want to use like this term. But maybe. But yeah, like on marcovisconti.org, you can find all of it. I am Marco Visconti everywhere because terminally online person.
Aren't we all?
And exactly. So yeah, and I mean, if you're curious, if you want to join my live streams on YouTube, I do them. I think I'm gonna move them to Fridays now. And in general, it's more like there's a topic there that I speak about, and then maybe people ask me questions. And it's always nice because there's like you always have around 50 to 100 people showing up. I'm still a very small channel, but it's very engaged, and I really like the live stream approach to things much more than recording a video and then after come. So yeah, join me on YouTube as well. Thank you so much for having me. Awesome. It's been a pleasure.
Yeah, thank you.
Yeah, thanks for coming on, Marco.